to another episode of the Tigers Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Schulte. You'll notice that there's no music. There's very little background noise. It's an emergency podcast, and it's such an emergency that I had to do it from my recliner. So there you go. With that, we're going to go ahead and get into a few things. Let's go ahead and update you on some injuries and some roster moves, and then we will go into uh, the draft and a couple of other things. So, on the injury front, Detroit got some help back um, in the forms of Riley Green, Akil Badu, Tarek Skubal, and Eduardo Rodriguez, as well as Alex Faedo. So they've made some roster moves to help with that. One of them they didn't want to have to make, but they did, which was putting Tyler Alexander, sorry, on the 60-day DL. He will not pitch for the Tigers again until 2024. He has a lat strain. There is no surgery required, but they feel that if he does they want to put him on a rest uh, program, and by the time that he gets that all sorted, um, to ramp him up and get him all set for the end of the season, they just figure it's not worth it for what he'd have to put his body through. So he is done for the year. And of course, putting him on the 60-day injured list gives Detroit some room on the 40-man roster. They had to make some other moves, though. Um, and there are some people that are coming back that will require some more moves, and we'll let you guys know about those moves as they happen. So, uh, Akil Badu and Riley Green have been reactivated. Tarek Skubal, Alex Faedo, and uh, Eduardo Rodriguez were also reactivated. Trey Winginter was also reactivated. Um, he was actually reactivated and then assigned to or optioned to Toledo. Alex Faedo made one start, gave up 7 runs to Toronto last Friday, and promptly was optioned down to AAA Toledo as well. Joey Wentz has been sent down to Toledo since we last talked. That was just after the Texas series. Detroit had an interesting road trip. They went 4-3 on the road trip, but then they came home and went 2-4 in a homestand against Oakland and Toronto. Now they have not had. I believe they're 5-19 against Oakland in the last 4 years or something like that. Like they have not had any success against the Oakland A's, and it doesn't matter who's in that uniform. It's just that uniform seems to bring out the worst in the Tigers, including a 12-run debacle in the second game of that series. So we'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. But back to the injury situation and the roster moves. So, uh, to make room for Green and Badu and Winginter, uh, Detroit made some moves. Actually, they didn't have to make one of the moves to make room for those three, but the second move they did. Um, Jonathan Scope was designated for assignment on Saturday, and he got the news Friday night, and Detroit made it official Saturday morning. And then Sunday, Detroit designated Jake Marisnick for assignment as well. Now, that move was a corresponding move from when they activated Winginter. They also brought up Bo Brisky from AAA, although he has not gotten any time in a game yet. They've not stretched him out as a starter. He's going to be a reliever, and so that's what that situation is. Tarik Skubal has looked good in his 2 outings. Eduardo Rodriguez looked good in his 1 outing. He pitched on Wednesday. So Skubal pitched Tuesday. It was interesting to see, and it's been interesting to see how A.J. Hinch has done this. So Skubal pitched on Tuesday, and him and Reese Olson had a combined no-hitter going into the 8th. More on combined no-hitters in just a moment. And then, of course, that was broken up. Detroit lost that game 1-0 in the 10th in 10 innings. And then Rodriguez pitched on Wednesday. He didn't look good from the score standpoint. He gave up 5 and didn't look good from that standpoint. But it was not a matter of him pitching badly. It was just a matter of, believe it or not, Oakland actually made contact. And so that was the situation there. And then, of course, on Thursday, the All-Star, Michael Lorenzen, went and pitched for the Tigers, and they ended up shutting out the A's 9-0. The big news of the week, though, aside from the return of Riley Green on Saturday, was the fact that on Saturday as well, Detroit threw the first combination no-hitter in their team's history. Now, there have been other teams to do it, but this is the first time the Tigers did it. The Tigers only have 9 no-hitters total as a team. So that's something of note. So yeah, that's the situation there. Matt Manning came in, went 5 1/3, and didn't even know that he had a no-hitter going. And then Jason Foley came in. Sorry, Matt Manning went 5 2/3, and then 6 2/3. Then Foley came in and pitched an inning and a third, and Alex Lang finished it off with an inning of no-hit ball. So combined no-hitter. Detroit beats Toronto 2-0, and then goes out and loses the final game of that series and the final game going into the All-Star break 4-3 in extras. They had a 3-0 lead going into the 8th, and then Toronto scored 4 unanswered to take the series 2-1 and the season series 4-2. So the good news for the Tigers is they're done with Toronto. They're done with Baltimore. And the reason that I say this is good news is because their record is absolutely atrocious against the American League East. The only 2 wins that they have against teams from the American League East are the Blue Jays. Baltimore has swept them twice. Tampa's swept them once. Boston swept them. So they've got one more series in Boston. Tampa comes to Detroit. And then, of course, they've still got 2 series against the Yankees before they're completely done with the American League East, and I'll be glad to see them go. So Detroit, as I said, went 2-4 on the homestand, losing both series to Oakland and Toronto. They went 4-3 on the road, and it was nice to see that because they split a 4-game series in Texas. They're done with Texas. They split a 4-game series with Texas, and then they took 2 out of 3 in Colorado, including a 14-9 slugfest on Sunday, the 2nd of July. where Jake Marisnik hit a grand slam, Javi Baez hit a grand slam. They had 2 grand slams in that game. Um, so kind of an up and down 2 weeks, and 2 weeks of um, some interesting roster moves and things like that. And now we come to the draft. So the draft happened on Sunday. The first 2 rounds were on Sunday. And then rounds 3 through 10 were on Monday. 10 through 20 were yesterday. 11 through 20 were yesterday. Detroit took 21 players, 9 high schoolers, 12 college players. Of course, the highlight of the draft was Sunday night, them taking Max Clark with the 3rd overall pick. We can and will root for Max Clark because he is he's a piano player. He has a 4.0 GPA in high school. But not only that, he coached a 10-year-old baseball team, and one of the kids from that team invited him to his birthday party, and he actually showed up. You know what? That makes him a good guy. We'll root for him. So Detroit takes 2 high school players with their first 2 picks, Max Clark and Kevin McGonigal. McGonigal is a shortstop out of the Philadelphia area. And then they take Max Anderson, the second baseman from Nebraska. Now, Max Anderson has some interesting numbers. He looks like he's going to hit. The problem that I have with Detroit's draft is not the fact that they took who they took, other than Max Clark. And here's the reason why. You have Wyatt Langford sitting there. Power hitting left fielder, hit 28 home runs in just under 60 games for the University of Florida this year, including a 457-foot homer in Omaha at the College World Series. So, he's there. Dylan Cruz has already been drafted. Paul Skeens has already been drafted. So, he's sitting there at 3. He's available. You know he's got big power. Your offense is struggling. You need players that are going to be impact bats right away. Now, in baseball, right away is a relative term. Not only that, but you don't have any right-handed outfielders in the pipeline right now. Okay, Justin Henry Malloy is a right-hander, but that's just one guy. So what do? You go out and you get a left-handed high school outfielder. Albeit, he apparently has extremely plus speed. But you've got Austin Meadows. You've got Parker Meadows. You've got Riley Green. You've got Akil Baddoo. You've got Kerry Carpenter. Is Matt Vierling going to be the answer in the outfield for your right-handed bat? I don't think so. You had a chance to get a guy that if he wasn't up next year could be up in 2025. And you take a project. You take a guy who, Riley Green was drafted in 2019. He made his big league debut in 2022. Now, he may have made it sooner had we had a minor league season in 2020. Nobody knows. But you have this guy who has good-looking numbers. Look, he hit over 600. He hit 6 homers in 28 games in high school, in his senior year. He walked 52 times. He struck out 6 times. Okay, I understand that. I get that. I can respect that. But you need offense sooner than later. So why take this guy when there's another guy who can come in and help out in the next couple of years? He's more advanced. Maybe he's got a little bit, maybe he's a little bit slower. Maybe he's more of a center fielder than a left fielder, which they did do. Florida did move him to center field and brought in a defensive replacement for him in left field more often than not in the late innings. I get that. But you have a guy who will allow you to do to make an offensive upgrade in the next couple of years, and he's sitting right there. Now, a lot of people had Max Clark going 4th or 5th. Detroit took him 3rd, so they've probably been able to sign him at a lower slot value, which means they had more money to offer to, like, Kevin McGonigal. He's actually a commit to Auburn. Max Clark is a commit to Vanderbilt. He probably won't go. So I get it. But when is this glut of left fielders or left-handed outfielders going to become too much of a problem? Where are you going to get a right-handed outfielder? Matt Vierling is not going to be the answer in the outfield as a right-handed bat. Matt Vierling's a good little player, but he's not going to be your right-handed bat because you want some right-handed power. And while he's shown some, isn't consistent enough to be that right-handed solution. So that's the big problem that I have with the Tigers draft. But we'll see what happens. Scott Harris, Rob Metzler, and Mark Connor know a heck of a lot more about this stuff than I do. So, you know what? We'll just let them do their thing. So, Detroit has Seattle and Kansas City. They've got a 7-game road trip, 3 in Seattle this weekend, 4 in Kansas City, starting on Monday. And then they come home to the Padres, the Giants, and they finish out the schedule. I'll have to look again. But the Padres and the Giants are their first 2 opponents. The Giants, of course, the Padres, Giants, and Angels are your 3 home opponents. The Giants, of course, that game is a makeup game from a series that happened in April and got rained out. Or sorry, in May, and the last game got rained out. So, with that, I am going to put a bow on this. I want to thank Anchor for distributing the podcast. I want to thank YouTube. If you are if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do so. www.youtube.com/@TBpodcast. You can catch me on Mastodon. Catch me on Mastodon at TB Podcast at tweezcake.social. You can also get me on Twitter at Podcast Tigers. You can email the show, tigersbaseballpodcast@gmail.com. And, of course, like, rate, and subscribe on YouTube or on your podcast catcher of choice. We will be back next week. It'll be a short turnaround time. We'll be talking about the Seattle series, and that will be a thing. So with that, I am going to say see you later. Thanks for listening, and go Tigers.